حي على الفلاح.
The compilation of the Qur'an during the time of Abu Bakr was a result of fear that it might be lost due to the death of those who had memorized the Qur'an. And then came the time of Uthman radiyallahu anhu wa ardah. Now what motivated Uthman to compile the Qur'an? It was narrated by Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu that Hudhayfa ibn al-Yaman radiyallahu anhu came to Uthman when he was on campaign with the people of Syria and the people of Iraq in the conquest of Armenia and Azerbaijan. And Hudhayfa was very alarmed by the differences in the recitation of those who were fighting, those who were in the forefront. Those differences of recitation, that there's something called the Qur'an was revealed in 7 different letters, 7 dialects. The language is one, the understanding is one, the meaning is one, but it was revealed on 7 different letters to facilitate for the different Arabian tribes or the main tribes that were there, Quraysh, Hudayl, Tamim, and so forth. The different Arab tribes that were around, the language was the same, but the words used were different. So as a facilitation, as it requested by the Prophet ﷺ, Allah revealed the Qur'an on 7 letters, 7 and no more. So when this recitation was done, Sahaba had memorized the Qur'an according to the letter that they had memorized. And the Sahaba knew the difference here. That's why the famous story, Umar radiallahu anhu, he's walking, he walks past a man who's reciting Surah Al-Furqan in Salat. As he's walking, he's hearing the recitation, he hears something different. He stops and he waits until he finishes prayer, even though he mentions in the hadith, I said to myself to go and grab him while he's praying and take him to the Prophet ﷺ. But he said, I made myself wait until he finished praying. Once he finished praying, imagine yourself, you're praying, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and then Umar grabs you. Says, come with me, you're coming with me to the Prophet ﷺ. He is reciting different to what I am reciting. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the Sahabi's name was Hisham. He said, oh Hisham, recite. Hisham, he recited. He said, oh Umar, recite. So Umar radiallahu anhu, he recited. He says, both of you have recited correctly. For verily the Qur'an has been revealed on 7 letters, 7 ahruf. Whichever one you recite, it is correct. And here we go back to Umar radiallahu anhu. He recognized what Hisham was reciting and where he was reciting from, which means that he recognized the recitation and where it was from. Just those small differences, which the meaning is the same, but the word is different, as one of the definitions is, alarmed Umar. Now that after that was established, the Sahaba, they understood, they knew, they acknowledged that which was happening, the facilitation, and this was in the beginning stages of Islam, for facilitating for the Sahaba, for the Arabs. With the conquests and the openings taking place and the foreigners, the non-Arabs entering into Islam, they didn't have that same understanding, or they didn't recognize those differences. So when they started reciting in that way, and that recitation was different, that came, or that opened the door for fitna, for fighting, for boasting. My recitation is better than yours. So when Hudhayfa, he heard this, he rushed to Medina, to Uthman radiallahu anhu, and he said, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, save this ummah before they differ concerning the revelation and the book as the Jews and the Christians did. The same way the Jews and the Christians, they started to argue and differ with one another regarding the revelation. Hudhayfa, he said, save the ummah before the same thing happens with the Muslimin. So when Uthman radiallahu anhu was told this by Hudhayfa, he sent word to Hafsa radiallahu anha requesting that the compiling that took place during the time of Abu Bakr be given to him, and then he will return it to her, the manuscript that was compiled during the time of Abu Bakr, to be sent, and it will be returned to you, O Hafsa. So she sent it to Uthman, and he ordered Zayd ibn Thabit Zayd ibn Thabit was recalled for a second time in his position. Zayd ibn Thabit, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Sa'id ibn al-As, and Abdurrahman ibn al-Harith. These were the four companions that were delegated the job by Uthman radiallahu anhu. Three of them are from Quraysh. The only one that's from the Ansar is Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhum ajma'een. So Zayd ibn Thabit, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Sa'id ibn al-As, and Abdurrahman ibn al-Harith. Four companions were delegated, were given that job to compile the Qur'an, put it in order, to compile the Mushaf. See the Mushaf that we have today? That is the order and the way that it was done at the time of Uthman. At the time of Abu Bakr, it was all gathered in one place, not placed in order or anything like that. During the time of Uthman, the Mushaf was compiled in the order that it was today to save the Ummah from what differing upon its revelation. The revelation is protected. The deen is protected. Who creates fitna? Who creates the differences and the conflict between the people? Even in the deen, who does so? The people, not the deen. There's no difference in the deen. There's no contradiction in the deen. But due to different opinions, different approaches, different understanding, the people differ. And their differences opens the door for conflict, for fitna, for so forth. And then when even worse than that is when the person who is indifferent to you doesn't have a sincere intention or isn't searching for the truth. So the conflict comes not from the Qur'an, not from the Sunnah, not from the revelation. The conflict comes from the minds and the understanding of the followers. So to save a big conflict that could take place amongst the followers of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Uthman radiallahu anhu, he assigned that job to these four Sahaba, and he said that if you differ on anything, then write it in the language of Quraysh, on the letter of Quraysh, for verily it was revealed to Quraysh. And they worked according to that. And before doing so, Uthman radiallahu anhu, he gathered the Sahaba, he gathered the main companions, and he consulted them regarding doing the Mushaf, compiling the Mushaf. And unanimous decision, consensus amongst them was to go forward with it. And that was compiled. 7 copies were made. In some narrations 8, in some narrations 6, doesn't matter. Number of copies were made. Each copy was sent to a main city at the time of Uthman radiallahu anhu. One was kept in Medina, one was sent to Mecca, one was sent to Al-Kufa, one was sent to Al-Sham, one mentioned to Egypt, one mentioned it was sent to Al-Bahrain, one to Sana'a. So it was distributed in the provinces of the Muslimin, and that was regarded the what? The Mushaf that every person who is teaching the Qur'an has to teach from that Mushaf. And then everything else was ordered to be burnt, except that which was compiled at the time of Abu Bakr, that was returned to Hafsa. And Ali radiallahu anhu, as we'll come to see at the time of fitna, because one of the things that they attacked Uthman for was this, was the compiling of the Qur'an and burning everything else. So at that time, Ali radiallahu anhu, he says, don't attack Uthman, for verily he did not do so except after consulting all of us. And we agreed with him, and if I was in his position, I would have done the exact same thing. So this virtue, this great virtue, if not one of the greatest virtues of Uthman, was uniting the Ummah on the one Mushaf, which later became or was known as Al-Mushaf Al Uthmani. And everyone followed that Mushaf. And then that Mushaf was written. If you open the Qur'an, the Mushaf today, take away all the dots, all the different signs that are there, tell you to stop or to continue, or where there's a mad, or where there's a fatha, where there's, take away all of that, and take away all the dots, that which tells you this is a ta or a tha or a ba or a ya. Take away all those dots, and that's how it was written. That's how it was written. Because the Arabs at that time had the ability, that's how they used to write. And that's how, and the reason that did so is that it can still preserve in it some of the letters that were revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for instance, one example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, in one of the recitations, كَالْعِهْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. In another recitation, كَالصُّوفِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. And they both have the same meaning, but one is on a different language. Another difference where the wording is the same, the letters without dots are the same, but can be used both ways. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذَا جَاءَكُمْ فَاسِقٌ بِنَبَإٍ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. In another qira'ah, another recitation that is recited today, فَتَبَيَّنُوا فَتَثَبَّتُوا. Same meaning, very similar meaning, which the ending of it is the same. So there's no two recitations that contradict one another. It's all was done as a facilitation to facilitate the memorization of the Qur'an for the Ummah. And Uthman radiallahu anhu, after the Mushaf and the Masahif were compiled, were written, were distributed, everything else was burnt and was destroyed, so that none of it can be used later on. And the Ummah until today follows the Mushaf of Uthman radiallahu anhu, and this is a great virtue for Uthman in fulfilling the promise of Allah that He is going to preserve for them their what? Their Qur'an, their revelation, their connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That it is 100% as it was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No other religion, no other followers of a Prophet or Messenger can claim such a thing except for the Muslimin. That it is 100% as it was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is an honor given to the Muslimin and to the Muslimin only. And there's a great wisdom behind all of this compiling done in the early stages after the death of the Prophet ﷺ by the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. So it can't come or be attacked that it wasn't done until what? Centuries after the death of the Prophet, as the people did, or as one of the main ways in which you can refute the claim of the Christians and the Jews is that the majority or not all of their writings was not done until centuries after the death of the Prophet or Messenger. Whereas the Muslimin, it was done shortly after the death of the Prophet ﷺ and closest to the era of the Sahaba and the presence of the major Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is, in summary, the compiling of the Qur'an that was done during the time of Abu Bakr and during the time of Uthman, and the great virtue that Uthman obtained by fulfilling the promise that was given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.